1 year and 1 week after I became president of the Richmond Football Club. In law terms, that's enough time for a good-sized transaction or trial that leads to a good-sized partner bonus. In Richmond Football Club terms, that's 4,761 kicks, 285 goals, 252 behinds, along with countless heart palpitations, gnashing of teeth, and opportunities to build character. It certainly has been an exciting few months for me, and I'm sure that you've heard during that time that, well, I'm different than the other club presidents. I think that as I stand here before you, it's obvious that I'm different than the others. And in fact, if I didn't know how fair the media is and what deep thinkers they are, you'd suspect that they might be prejudiced against someone like me having a senior role in football. What would I know? What are my credentials? How dare I even think I was entitled to be involved in the highest levels of football? So at the end of my rookie season as president, I can finally stand here before you today and say, okay, I get it. I am different because I'm an American. Honestly, the way some media commentators carried on, you'd think they'd never met an American with an interest in the game before, and I could name dozens if they'd only asked me. But as you can probably tell, there are two subjects that have consumed a great portion of my life. The law. I'm one of those people who didn't like law school, but I've loved practicing law. As with most young lawyers, I thought that practicing law would be a momentary blip on my true career path, as I discovered it over the years, whatever that might be. I was really meant for something else, and that something else would reveal itself if I just stuck with it long enough. But 30 years later, I must reluctantly admit that the law was the true career for me. I love working with clients, I love the intellectual challenge, and practicing in a law firm environment. I've only worked in law firms, so I don't have the breadth of experience that some of you have who have been in-house or in other environments. However, I understand the value of law firms in calculating effectiveness in time units of 6, much like a footy goal, really. And I get the concept of kicking behinds. Near enough isn't good enough in the law or in football. My second big love is football. And for many years, attending games was my release from the day-to-day worries of the legal world. But now football is my part-time job that's a full-time preoccupation. For a football fan, becoming president is a dream come true, which on occasion turns into a nightmare before your very eyes, but that's enough about the first 13 rounds of the Tigers' 2014 season. However, I found that I'm not the only lawyer who loves the game, many of you here in the room today. And in fact, it occurred to me that so many lawyers are involved in football that it's almost as if we innately speak the same language. So I've been thinking deeply about this over the last few months, and I've come up with the definitive list of why football is a great metaphor for the law. I know that most lists are top 10, this or that, but in football we know that only the top 8 counts. Not 9 in other years. Tiger supporters made the 8 this year. So here is my top 8 list of why football is a great metaphor for the law. Rules. Both love the rules. Rules of the game are often as complicated as the rule of law. These are the rules that are in the spirit of the game, which I equate to the rules of equity or the common law. Both love changing the rules often. A lawyer likes nothing more than a big, meaty piece of new legislation. Hearing phrases bandied about like obiter dictum, nunc pro tunc, res ipsa loquitur, mulling over all those hot topics. How will the judges interpret it? How will the appeal court read it? How will I get that all-important article published first? And football also loves nothing more than dealing with rule changes. In the back, interchange violations, too fast, too slow, let's keep tinkering. How will the umpires interpret it? How will the match review panel see it? And in recent days, football also ponders, how will the federal court see it? How will the appeal to the federal court see it? And just as with the law, in football, there's nothing protected from amendment. Nothing so precious that it can't be made just a little better if we worked a little more on the rules. Again, as with the law, discussing the rules keeps a lot of people in jobs in football. Some might say that having a football column on the rules is akin to having your case cited in a legal journal. And where would we be without each player having their own journalist? That's how many journalists covered football in 2013, one for each player on a senior list. That's 4 times more than covered politics in Canberra. But then again, it's important that we have our priorities right. Football has spawned its own TV network and occupies a great deal of free-to-air TV time. Where would we be without On the Couch, daily editions of 360, Eddie and Durham, Game Day, before the game, during the game, after the game, and the all-important Footy Classified, where hating the other people on the panel is the only requirement. So it's good that the housekeeping issues of football provide employment for so many people. Now, I think the law could be inspired by this media domination. I could see On the Bench, with Chief Justice Warren, Justice Ferguson, Justice Sloss, all Tiger supporters I've chosen. Cameos perhaps by Justice Kirby as a sort of dissenter classified. Or Before the Trial, featuring big-name litigators, giving a preview of what to expect on that week's law list. And an insight into the strategies, along with some commentary on which lawyers and barristers are performing well this season. Wouldn't we all be riveted and waiting for our invitation to appear? And the law footy show hybrid about rules we've been waiting for, The Tribunal Tonight, with a weekly guest appearance by Stevie J from the Cats. Both try to avoid drafting errors. Some of these errors are very dire. Now, what lawyer hasn't felt the floor fall from beneath them when they realized that the document was executed with that all-important word "not" missing from that clause? When the last amendment, which was the result of many hours of negotiation, seems to have disappeared from the paper. In football, drafting errors are not paper errors, they're people errors. Richmond fans can be reduced to tears just thinking about almost any draft before 2006 and wonder how we consistently managed to get it wrong. Richmond had 5 picks in the 2004 draft, and only one of those men still playing football. We seemed to throw the names and a few highlights tapes down the craps table, and we drafted whoever's name landed upright. But law has its human drafting errors too. It's called graduate recruiting. While in football they're generally called duds, in law, and I remember this from my days in the recruiting panel at Herbert Smith Freehills, they were known as pures. That's short for previously unidentified recruiting errors. You know, when year 2 rolls around and the culling of the pack occurs, yes, list management comes in many forms. Both football and law love hypotheticals. There's nothing a lawyer loves more than a bit of mental gymnastics to test the boundaries of logic, to trip each other up, to show off for our peers. What if this? What if that? Well, in football, we love hypotheticals too. It's called the Dream Team competition. Will I concoct a team that will astound other footy tragics? Will I find player X that no one else has identified but will brand me a genius? Will Brian Taylor make it through the season without breaching Section C of the Racial Vilification Act? The Brownlow count is virtually indistinguishable from becoming a silk. In both instances, there's a search to find the best and fairest as determined by independent judges, whether the umpires or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Once you have either credential, you amass riches and acclaim beyond your wildest dreams. You become, as Bruce McIlvaney would say, special. Both umpires in the Supreme Court dress in uniforms that would not be allowed in polite company, and I guess that applies to some of the Brownlow nominees and their dates. But come to think of it, it applies to a lot of barristers too. I think there's an important topic on which we can all agree. Colored bow ties are not for either football or the law. They should be left fairly and squarely to anesthetists and actuaries. In law and football, there are definite tribes. In both, you can tell by what they're wearing if they're with us or against us. No matter how disparate 2 people's backgrounds might be, as soon as you see that tiger scarf wrapped around the neck of your new companion or colleague, or see that magnificent yellow sash cutting across whatever size or gender chest with the great black jumper adorns, there's an instant bond and camaraderie. And in St. Kilda's case, perhaps a little sympathy. No explaining needed. You find yourself hugging your fellow yellow and black adorned spectator after a big win. Those same people who in other circumstances you'd cross the street to avoid. I was recently walking down Swan Street, and as Jeff said, I still live in Richmond, and a cafe owner whom I know, a big Tiger supporter, I know all the big Tiger supporters in Richmond, called out. A small birthday party was taking place late in the afternoon in his cafe. It was for Bobby, and as they say, colorful character, who lives around Swan Street and who spends most of her time drinking coffee and riding trams. He thought that I'd want to be part of singing happy birthday to Bobby because several of the shop owners there were presenting Bobby with a new Richmond jacket, with the Richmond song blaring in the background. So because Bobby loves the Richmond Football Club loves Bobby. I'm not sure that too many other club presidents run in social circles that include people like Bobby, but we're a close-knit neighborhood down Swan Street. But in law, it's much the same. You can tell by looking which big tribe a lawyer comes from. We all know that an Allen's person's never mistaken for King Wood's Mallison's person, and heaven forbid that anyone confuses a Herbert Smith Freehills lawyer for a Gilbert and Tobin lawyer. You'd have to agree there must be some radar. Otherwise, how is to explain why a defense lawyer automatically knows who the plaintiff's lawyer is? But while we're on the subject of colors, can anyone tell me why a club was allowed to pick teal? And then why that club was allowed to be on the ground in the finals with a club who was wearing purple? There's some things that should be banned as a visual assault. Clubs should only be allowed to wear primary colors. So I think we need to get a few lawyers in the Rules Committee on that. And as for lawyers, in this downturn in the legal economy, someone can surely see the wisdom of selling front of the suit, back of the suit to sponsors. Lawyers like to use football terminology to describe their exploits of daring do, to draw parallels between their astounding efforts in the catacombs of the office and the athletic endeavors of the champions of the game. M&A lawyers are the best at this, as they see themselves as the warrior class. Litigation would be probably a close second. Junior lawyers are told they'll be given a chance to come off the bench and are lucky to be joining the senior side. In the tough legal world of paper cuts and brain burn from too much time on the mobile phone, it's now our turn to put our heads over the ball and to coat hanger that menacing figure in the pinstripe suit on the other side of the table in that glistening office in the sky. You've no doubt heard partners talk about giving a senior associate a hospital hand pass, very funny, and about being able to endure the intense physical demands of the all-night negotiation session due to a good preseason, lamenting the collapse of a deal to loss of form. M&A and litigation see themselves as the elite midfielder who also goes forward and kicks goals, and all the other legal practitioners are there to, at most, provide a rebound out of defense. Interestingly, I've never heard a football player draw parallels between themselves and lawyers. I've never once heard Luke Hodge burst with pride and gloat. I got that ball through traffic and into the forward line as smoothly as a clever clause in a business sale agreement. Or, wow, my smother at the end of the Port Adelaide game was as desperate as a law graduate with mediocre grades at a meet and greet cocktail party. But then perhaps I just don't know Luke Hodge well enough. Law firms and football clubs are full of lawyers. Just at Richmond alone, we have 4 lawyers on our 9-person board, and our CEO is a lawyer too. I think this factor alone explains why we've turned things around. One of our players is also studying law. I think he shows maturity well beyond his years. We all know you can never have too many lawyers. We have a coterie group called Tigers at Law, and Michael Green, who runs it, is here with us today. I think most clubs have a legal coterie group. Lawyers want to be acknowledged for how much they bring to football. The AFL CEO is a lawyer. The commissioners have at least 2 lawyers among their numbers. I think if they had a majority of lawyers, things would probably be running a bit more smoothly. There's also the tribunal, the appeals tribunal, the integrity unit, the in-house counsel's office. The Melbourne Football Club president is a Clayton Utes partner. The Hawthorn president's a lawyer as well. The Gold Coast president's at Minner Ellison. And at the Bulldogs, Peter Gordon's president. When you hear a club comment that it's only a governance issue, you can be sure that there aren't any lawyers on that board. Only a governance issue? There is no such thing as only a governance issue. And who would have thought that Essendon would have contributed so much to the law this year? The number one reason, it's difficult to find women in senior roles in either. In both, women in senior roles are still something of a novelty. Another female judge, another female partner, how quaint. Of course, we all know that with so many women coming out of law school, it's a given this will turn around soon. I've been hearing that during all the years I've been practicing law, and I'm still waiting. In football, at least, there's been the argument that only men play the game at the highest level, and that playing the game was seen as a condition precedent, legal talk, to being involved in the business of the game. I don't know what the law's excuse is, since physical prowess has never been a requirement. This is a cartoon that was in The Age the day after I was named president. And while it's well-meaning, I think we all know that things aren't so simple as having someone kick a football through the glass ceiling, in sport or in anything else. If that were true, the women who have been pounding on the glass ceiling with high heels all these years would have cracked through a long time ago. So there's a lot of work to be done. And in this vein, I want to talk about women in football and also to bring to your attention some of the things underway at Richmond to promote gender equity. The AFL was at the forefront of sports in Australia when it promulgated its respect and responsibility policy in 2005. The policy was an important step in making women feel safe and welcome as spectators and as participants of the game. No doubt its impact was significant. However, that policy didn't necessarily translate to women's involvement in the business of the game. It's been left to clubs to chart their own course in this regard, and I might say that the AFL has not been a beacon of light in its own organization when it comes to gender equity. In fact, I would say the AFL lags behind most clubs. At present, there are 22 women club directors. Most have one woman, some have two, like Richmond, and only the Bulldogs have 3. There's still one club, West Coast, that has no women on its board since Julie Bishop stepped down last year. Many clubs don't have any women in the executive ranks. At Richmond, 2 of the 7 general managers are women. But given the prominent place that football occupies in this country, and some would say the power that it has, it seems obvious that the entire community should be represented around the table. However, in my view, achieving gender diversity isn't simply a matter of sprinkling a handful of women into decision-making roles. Diversity, gender or otherwise, must go hand in hand with genuine inclusion, which means that the strength of the culture which underpins the diversity agenda is crucial. And we're committed to building that culture at Richmond. In the past couple of years, the Richmond Football Club concluded that gender diversity made good sense on so many levels that we decided to get serious about it. First, we examined our membership base and discovered that we were below industry average in the percentage of women who were members. The industry average is about 34%, and figures provided by the AFL, and that showed that we were at about 32%. Consequently, we've set ourselves the ambitious target of achieving 50% women members in the next decade. And generally, members don't switch clubs, you all know that, so it's quite an ambitious effort that we're going to have to put in. Second, the board instructed management to develop and implement a female engagement strategy to not only better engage with the club's female supporter base, but also to find and include women at all levels of the club and in all areas of the business. One of the first things management did was to review the communications that we send out and the way we present ourselves on our website. Do those images and words give an accurate depiction of who we are? Do we show the variety of our membership? And third, and perhaps the most far-reaching and significant effort, is a project which the club initiated and which has been funded by the AFL and the Australian Sports Commission. The project is concerned with identifying the real and perceived reasons that women do not occupy positions of leadership across all of Australia's sporting bodies, not just AFL. The first phase of the project has involved interviewing more than 60 men and women from inside and outside the AFL industry about their experiences and opinions. This was necessary to determine the scope of the problem and to also get the opinions of a broad cross-section of the community. And the firm Bluestone Edge, who did the review of Australian swimming after the London Olympics, conducted this stage of the project and has issued a report in July. It's called Gender Equity, What It Will Take to Be the Best. And that report, with a foreword written by Elizabeth Broderick, reveals an explicit acknowledgement of the need to address gender inequity throughout sports. And while it indicates that many think we're on the brink of change, it also showed there was great cynicism as to whether we would ever actually achieve it. You can find an abridged version of the report. It's about 55 pages long on the Richmond website if you're interested in reading some more. But the report's conclusions clearly aren't confined to just sporting organizations, and it sets out a range of practical strategies to consider in four broad categories: structural, cultural, leadership, and business. In the second phase of this project, now that we have the report, over 2015 and 2016, the next 2 years, the Richmond Football Club will work to implement the report's recommendations across its business. We've committed to design measurable, practical ways to embed gender equity into the management and governance of our club. Management is presently working on a paper for the board as to how this project will roll out across the organization, and all departments, including football, have been involved in the think tank sessions as we try to bring this to life. And in the final phase of the project, the club will report on what we've achieved. We'll be judged by our results. It's rather daunting to be so exposed, but we believe that we're up to the challenge. And people might say, how does this benefit what happens on the field? Why bother? I've concluded in my time on the board, which is now 9 years, that if the off-field things aren't in order, on-field success isn't going to happen. And I'm sure most, if not all of you, are aware of the extensive research which shows that the most successful organizations have a variety of people from different backgrounds working in the business, and that those diverse views make for better decision-making. Besides being convinced that diversity is the right thing to do, we're convinced that it makes great business sense. And a better business delivers better financial results, which means more money to support football, more money to hire great staff, more money to build necessary facilities. And anything that we can do to improve the club's financial stability means we increase the likelihood we'll achieve football success. On another front, as Jeff mentioned, the Victorian government under Minister Damien Drum has established a task force on women in sports and recreation. And I've been asked to chair that task force, which had its first meeting last week. And while we're still finalizing our terms of reference, this will be a 12-month project to identify and promote ways to attract women to roles and participation in Victorian sports and active recreation. And while there are some state-based elite sporting organizations, most sporting clubs are small, community-based, and don't have very many resources. And part of the task force job is to identify ways to assist those kinds of organizations to make these changes. So as you can see, there's quite a bit happening in the sporting world about gender equity, but then there's a lot to be done. As most of you know, bringing about lasting change often requires having a few attempts before you get some traction. So in the year that I've been president, it's been a matter of getting on with the job. It's a big job. It's a job that I've been honored to undertake. I knew that I was in for a big year when in March at my first dinner with the other club presidents, the AFL Commission and the club CEOs, I found myself assigned to sit next to AFL Chairman and former Carlton steely-eyed ruckman Mike Fitzpatrick. So I was the focus of his questions and jokes for the meal. And for that long, long dinner, a good 4 quarters, if not 4 courses, an equal number of bottles of wine, I think I had an inkling of what it would have been like to have faced him across Center Square one gloomy, rainy afternoon at Princess Park. It was rather terrifying. "It's important that you make this work," he said to me. No elaboration needed, all understood. I had no idea that Americans meant so much to him. So thank you for your attention, and I'm sure you'll agree, if you ever had any doubt, that the law in football is a match made in heaven. Go Tigers.